Hi everyone, it's Nicole here for Lawn Fun, and today I'm sharing a Spooky Village scene card using the new Spooky Village and Tiny Halloween stamps and dies from the Fall and Winter 2019 release. I'm also going to use one of my favorite background dies, the Stitched Hillside Portrait backdrop, to kind of help create this scene. I've die cut the Portrait Stitched Hillside backdrop from smooth white cardstock, and I've taped off the bottom portion from the top so that I can build the sky for my scene first. We're going to apply Wild Honey Distress ink and then chipped sapphire and black soot around this. Because I am using smooth white cardstock and not a specialty cardstock, it might take a little bit more work to get a seamless blend, but it's definitely worth the effort. I'm just going to gradually build up the chipped sapphire color, blending down into the wild honey, and I'm just going to keep working on it. It does take a little bit of effort. I've left the whole thing in because I really wanted to show how I built this background sky, because I love this color combination for Halloween and fall themed cards. I'm even really pulling the chipped sapphire down into wild honey. You're still going to see the wild honey underneath, but it helps mute it just a little bit. I'm going to pull the chipped sapphire color up towards the top of this panel before I take black soot, and then I will apply that at the top and gradually pull that down. I'm going to go back and forth between all of the colors until I get that blend that I want. And then we will tape off the top part of the card so that we can add our green to the bottom of the card. I purposely chose kind of more muted colors so it isn't quite as bright. That was the kind of the color palette I'm going for, which you'll see when I go to color in the Spooky Village houses and images that we'll be using for this scene card. I'm going to pull out my Post-it tape that I used to mask off this bottom portion. And then I'm simply going to grab some more to place kind of underneath this edge so that I can add my greens for the background. I want to make sure that even the border that I've inked is masked off so I don't contaminate it with my green inks. Starting with peeled paint and forest moss, pardon me, I'm going to just ink this top portion with my darker color. The lighter color will be concentrated down near the bottom. These are nice, dark, kind of more muted, perfect colors for fall. We are completely covering this white background with our distress inks. If you like the look of adding water to your inks, you could always spritz, especially the sky, with a little bit of water if you wanted to. I'm going to do something, or not add any water, pardon me, to the background of this today, as I want to keep my sky kind of clean and simple as far as that goes. Without additional distressing, as I'm going to be adding some bat images and things like that up to the top of the card, and that is where we're going to stamp and emboss the sentiments from Spooky Village for the sentiment on this card today. And I thought it would just be really nice and legible if I left it a little bit more clean without that added distressing. Adding a little bit more color here and there, just trying to even it out and get it blended as best as I can. I even added a little black soot to the top edge of that border. And then we're going to remove our masks here in a second as well, before we stamp the images from Spooky Village and Tiny Halloween. I'm going to take all the images I'm using from these two stamp sets and place them in my MISTI before stamping them with Lawn Fawn black licorice ink. So I've got all my stamps already as I laid them out prior to inking up my background, so I kind of had an idea of what all I wanted to use for my card. I'm going to take a piece of Neenah Smooth White cardstock. It's a scrap piece. These are all fairly small images. It's a nice thin strip. We're going to ink up those images with the jet black ink and stamp them on this white piece of cardstock. I love using the MISTI in case I need to restamp some of the images. Since these had not been stamped before, a couple of them needed to be stamped more than once just to get that great black outline. Along the bottom of the screen, I have listed the colors I'm using for each area of these houses. I decided to go for a muted kind of rainbow, if you will, using many colors of the rainbow, but more in the darker kind of jewel tones. So we've got a nice dark blue color combination with B95, 97, and 99. Some YR 31 and 23 will be the color combination I use for the windows in all of the houses. For the wood boarding up the windows and the porch, I'm using E55 and E57. I'll be using these colors for the leafless trees as well. Even though this is a Halloween card, I kind of call these not so scary Halloween because the images are just so cute and fun. I really love that Lawn Fawn is continuing with their little village images and having these great little Halloween houses. Just a fun little addition to this series of stamps. For the roof of this house, I'm using BG 72 and 75. The other thing I love about these spooky village houses is the little ghosts. So most of the houses have a little ghost coming out from somewhere, plus there's additional ghost images. The smaller of the two individual ghost images is from Spooky Village. The other one is from the Tiny Halloween stamp set. So I love mixing and matching. I'm going to zoom in for the rest of the coloring. Hopefully it makes it a little easier to see. The ghosts are colored with C00 and C3. We'll even use a little R00 for the cheeks. I'm going to try to catch all the ghosts here with one pass, as long as I don't forget any of them. For the next house, I'm using R35, 37, and 39. To keep this from looking too Christmassy, I like to go with a little bit darker shading. And then I try to really be careful not to use greens with my reds. So for the red house, we'll be using a blue roof. Then we'll be using our E55 and E57 for the porch and steps. YR 31 and 23 were again used for the window, so it appears that there's some glowing lights coming out of the house. And then B95, 97, and 99 were used for the roof and the door. For any of the grass, including leaves and then the little tufts of grass around the tombstones, I am using YG 93, 95, and 99. For the orange house, I'm using a lot of the same colors that I use for the lights in the windows. To darken that up though, and to make it more orangish, we're using YR 24 and 27. We're going to keep YR 31 and 23 for the light coming out of the windows, and just kind of keep working on darkening up that house with YR 27 and 24. The jack-o'-lanterns on my card and any pumpkins will also be colored with YR 24 and 27. The chimney for this house will color with R37 and 39 for a nice dark deep red. I'm going back over some of the ghosts as I felt like they needed blended just a tiny bit better. We're going to pull in a little cool gray 5 with cool gray 3 and 00 for our tombstones. Then we've got our little trio of smaller houses, our pumpkins, a cloud or a couple clouds, a moon, and some trick-or-treaters left to color. Again, those pumpkins are going to be colored with YR 24 and 27 with E57 as the stem, YR 31 and 23 for the moon, and some cool grays foreshadowing the clouds. YR 31 and 23 for the lights coming out of the windows in this little trio of houses. And we're going to simply repeat a lot of the same colors that I've already used. So BG 72 and 75 for this first house, E55 and E57 for the steps on the houses, YR 24 and YR 27 for the jack-o'-lantern, YG 93, 95 for the roof and the door on the first house, with R 37 and 39 for the chimney. B 95, 97 and 99 for the blue house. And this time, instead of having that kind of darker teal colored roof, since we just used that for the house next to it, we're going to do an orange roof with YR 24 and 27. The door will match. And then the roof will be red. I kept the chimney will be red. I kept the chimneys all the same on my card as just kind of a nice little way to add a pop of color to each house. Our 35, 37, and 39 for the last house with the dark teal roof in BG 72 and 75. We'll take some cool grays to the clouds and just trace with C3 and blend out with C00. The trick-or-treaters, again, just going to be a continuation of the colors you've seen before. Really small, so I'm not going to worry too much about blending a whole lot. Maybe in a couple areas, but really not go over the top. The only additional color I used was E11 to do the skin for the faces on the candy corn costume and the witch costume. Once all the coloring's done, I die cut all of the images with the Spooky Village and Tiny Halloween coordinating dies. I've laid out my images on my background, leaving room for the sentiment at the top of the card. I'm going to use a powder tool, and then I'm going to line up the sentiments, ghostly greetings, and from our patch to yours. I love this sentiment. I'm going to stamp that along the top with the Lawn Fawn embossing ink, and then I'm going to heat set this with Lawn Fawn white embossing powder. The white is really going to pop off that dark distress inked background, plus tie in to the white outline around our die cut images. I absolutely love how the white looks against this beautiful black soot and chipped sapphire distress ink. We will heat set this, and then we can bring it back to our card. Now, to give my frame a little more dimension than this outside panel, I have die cut the stitched hillside backdrop one other time from smooth white cardstock, discarding that center piece. We'll be layering that in a little bit. First though, I do want to stamp a couple things that are going to be on the background that I won't be able to add later. This little fence from the Spooky Village stamp set, I'm going to stamp along the border up at the top, and I'm going to stamp it twice along the border along the bottom edge. This just adds to the overall scene. You could also stamp and die cut this image if you didn't want to stamp it directly on the background. I'm using the Fawn Black Licorice ink to stamp this image on my scene. I will wait until I've adhered the rest of my images to stamp the bats. That's because I want to make sure I leave plenty of room for them, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to adhere the houses yet. I have a general idea, but I want to make sure that everything fits together before I add those cute little bat images to finish off our Ghostly Greetings Spooky Village scene. Let's go ahead and take our elements now and put it all together. I'm going to put adhesive all over the front of a top fold card base and then pop my white frame right down onto my card base and add in that inked center panel. Then I'm going to put adhesive around the frame only and pop that in place as well. I used some double-sided Fawn adhesive tape for this. I like to use my Spellbinders Tool-in-One to peel up that tape. And we're going to pop that down in place. I did spill something on my background, and you can see that it was a drop of water, and it did react with, or the ink reacted with it, so it kind of wicked it away. Luckily, I'm going to be able to cover up most of that with my images, so I didn't worry about it this time. But a note to self, be careful if you have a cup of water and it has condensation on it, like mine did, because it did leak and drip on my card. I am adhering my images with foam adhesive so that they have lots of dimension. In fact, I think everything on this design, as far as the die cut images, are adhered with the foam adhesive. I'm using a combination of foam adhesive squares and foam strips. These products can be found in the supply list below the video or also linked on my blog. I love foam tape for creating easy depth and dimension. I'm going to take a black pen and just add in some detail to the ghost's eyes and the doorknobs, being really, really careful not to hold that pen down in place too long so that it doesn't make a big glob of black ink, because these images are super teeny tiny. Once I have all of my images down, now I can do finishing details. That includes making sure all of these images have the eyes adorned with black pen, and then we will take those bat images and add those to the sky. I'm going to add 3 of them. I like adding embellishments, or in this case, small stamped images in groups of 3. There are also dies for this, so if you want to, you could always stamp these on a separate piece of paper and die cut them and add them to your card. I'm going to take a white pen and add some highlights to my stamped and colored images now. In addition to the white pen detail, I also want to take a Stardust glitter pen and trace over the spider webs on 2 of the houses, so that they have a little bit of that glittery glow to them. I also realized that I forgot to adhere this tree as I was adding embellishment to all of these little houses and bits and pieces. I'm going to take a fine tip black pen instead of my glaze pen to add detail to the jack-o'-lanterns' faces because I was really afraid that the black ink would glob out and ruin them. And there is my finished Spooky Village card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Spooky Village card featuring new stamps and dies from Fawn. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Fawn stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.